Hey up lads and lasses, Damphyre here, back again with some more Infinite Lagrange. So, carrying on with the ship updates, I noticed actually that I am missing one of them, missing the new one, I don't even remember what it's called. So if you do have that, and you've done some tests and stuff like that, do let me know sort of like what you think. If you go down into the description box below, there should be a link to my Discord. You can get in there and ping me on Discord, and I'll need some screenshots and that kind of thing if you want to help out. Otherwise, you're just gonna have to wait until I maybe eventually pick it up. God knows how long that'll friggin' take, because it took me forever to get some of these other ships, but yeah, there you go. So, we've done the Xeno, we've done the Meress, I believe I've done the Carillion, the Meren, the Merti, and the Reliat, which means it's the Ruby and the Noma left. Did I do the Carillion? I'll double check after this video if I've done the Carillion or not. So, I want to do the Ruby now, though, because the Ruby is one of the definitely better of the frigates. Two of the variants are very, very good. One of them not so much, and that is the A-type, which we are currently looking at. So we'll jump in anyway, and I'll talk a bit about them. They're all okay ships. The B and the C are particularly quite good, though. They're well above average in terms of, well, what they provide and what they can do, because obviously the B-type is like pure damage dealing, where the defensive is, you know, pure tank, very little damage dealing. So yeah, the A-type though, it sits mid-row, which means that you probably do want to go into the armor system first when upgrading it, and you probably want to go double HP. The physical resists don't really matter, so you can skip this and come back to it a little bit later on. You're only going to get 3 armor here, which means you're only going to ignore 3 extra damage coming at you. In the case of early game frigates, that could be, you know, enough to sort of warrant the 8 points. But generally speaking, I don't think it is. Because, you know, most people are running like ions, rubies, which are high energy damage, which ignores the armor anyway. Or, you know, there is cases where, you know, you've got Carillions and Meresses and stuff like that, and they will, in that case, you know, the extra armor helps a little bit. But then again, you know, the Meresses are hitting for massive amounts of damage, so 8 damage out of the whatever the alpha is off a Meress really isn't going to do much. Which is, you know, it's a little bit unfortunate, but that's the way they designed the game, so that's what we have to work around. So after the armor system, absolutely just go straight into its big giant railgun, which is fantastic. You get 320 damage per hit. Not the fastest firing weapon, of course, being a big railgun with a 12-second cooldown, especially on frigates. That's quite slow compared to most of them for fire rates. But, you know, not many of them have 320 damage per hit. Actually, I'm not even sure any of them have 320 damage per hit. Something to note, the physical armor penetration when the target is a super capital ship has a chance to disable its physical armor. I actually haven't seen this working at all in tests, so I'm not sure this is actually a functional aspect of the weapon. You know, back in the day, a lot of tests were done. Null Pointer has done a lot of tests and stuff, and this didn't seem to do anything as far as we could see. It definitely doesn't disable the armor on ships, because we had these fighting or shooting at ST-59, so they definitely didn't take an increased damage or anything of that nature when they're sat at like 720 armor. So there's a possibility that maybe it's just like a small damage reduction, or sort of small like armor reduction. Enough on something like the ST-59 where it didn't actually matter. So yeah, it's a bit of an awkward one. So I, generally speaking, just ignore that it exists. The strategy, again, prioritize firepower, 85% cooldown, turn off other weapon systems for 60 seconds for 10 seconds isn't particularly great. It's another one of those ones that you kind of sit there, and generally speaking, your points are better spent elsewhere. Hit rate is very important on this ship. Railguns have an awful base hit rate. I think it's one of, if not the worst in the game, if I remember rightly, after a lot of testing. So definitely pick up both of these hit rate upgrades first. You do have 6 slots to play around with, and you're ignoring the strategy here, so it's not too bad. So double hit rate, I would recommend taking this cooldown reduction, and then after that, you can either go double damage, but I will point out that this is actually quite a nice upgrade, which increases railgun damage by 40% and cooldown by 20% with an additional energy charge. This increases the amount of time it takes to fire, but you can offset it quite well with the decreased weapon cooldown, and you're getting a 40% damage increase, which is actually really nice. When bolstered with the extra damage increase from the increased railgun damage, you can see that this thing actually starts going to a point where it's like hitting really damn hard, plus a 5% increase of damage. This damage stack on this is actually really good. So yeah, thankfully, you know, only having 1 cooldown reduction isn't so bad. There is an option to drop one of the railgun damages to pick up the reactive explosive warhead. In this instance, I personally prefer the railgun damage, as it's a little bit more stable, but I do, you know, I have seen, and it does work, the explosive reactor warhead's doing quite well. It's just a little bit more luck-based, which is a bit unfortunate. You do get the firing assistance enhancement here, which buffs up when I find it. If I can find it. Why can't I find it? There it is. Firing assistance enhancement. It gives you an extra buff to your hit rate, which is really good as well. Again, for railguns, which have poor ability to hit other frigates and destroyers because of the base dodge rate being pretty decent, on top of hit rates of railguns being pretty poor. That's actually a really nice upgrade, and it actually increases your damage output more so than the 30% loss that it received. So yeah, it's a pretty good damaging ship. So definitely check it out. After the main weapon system, jump into its secondary system here. It's pretty standard for this one. You probably want the double hit rate, and you want one of the cooldowns and one on the lock-on efficiencies is my go-to. That's due to the fact that 10 damage per hit, you're not going to get anything from damage mods, which there aren't any. And the cooldown, although nice, the lock-on efficiency generally provided better damage output. And yeah, I wouldn't really upgrade either of these on here. The anti-aircraft recognition system isn't too bad. It increases the lock-on efficiency, but the lock-on efficiency, it's okay at 2 seconds really. So I wouldn't worry about it. And with one cooldown, that 5-second cooldown comes down enough that it's, you know, it's reasonable to say the least. And again, it's not like it's going to be shooting across the entire row, unfortunately. So the anti weapons on this are kind of negligible. You can choose to ignore them if you want to. After that, you have cruising and warp speed. Nothing particularly interesting going on there. So that's pretty much it for the A-type. If you are, you know, missing B and C variants of this ship, and you're, you know, low on other ships that I've previously mentioned, like MRS and stuff like that, this definitely can fill a role of a damage dealer, and it works quite well in that role. It's definitely one of the better tiered frigates, even the the A-type, which is probably its worst of its variants, and it's still above average, so it's a good ship to grab hold of when you can and if you can. Moving on to the ion cannon type, and this is a little gem of a frigate. It loses its like massive alpha damage potential at only 316, so it's not like massively far behind. But you do get, you know, a double damage frequency. This is kind of like a mini IO in how it terms it for its damage ability. 4-second lock-on time, a 4-second cooldown, a 4-second duration. It just rapidly ramps damage. You do unfortunately lose a mod slot here. Rapid fire is on it again, which unfortunately isn't particularly great. It's one you can ignore. I have picked it up just to play around and test it. I found it wasn't particularly great. The 5% damage is actually quite nice here. But similar to railguns, ions have trouble hitting. Also, with ions, if they miss, it's both of their next shots for that 2 times damage frequency. that miss. It can't hit once the first shot misses, so you need to make sure this hits. Absolutely. It can miss mid-shot, so you can hit the first shot, miss the second, but if it misses that first shot, you will never hit both shots, which is quite a drawback to ion cannons, honestly. But, you know, they are energy-based weapons, which means they are just premium DPS. If they do start hitting stuff, they will shred through things because the damage mitigation isn't so bad on them compared to what flat armor can do, as an example. So, double hit rate is an absolute must on this ship, in my opinion. Now, for your third and fourth, I prefer double cooldown, but there is an argument to go single cooldown, double damage. Now, the reason I prefer to go double cooldown is, again, because if you miss those 2 times damage frequencies, you miss both, which means you want to try and cycle faster to get the next 2 shots out. If you go for the damage, you're going to take a longer time to cycle, which means, generally speaking, you'll find in sort of medium matchups where, like, you got a medium time frame, like that 5 minutes. This will actually, going double cooldown, will actually increase your effective damage per minute. So bear that in mind. Personally, double cooldown, but again, if you want to see the bigger numbers, damage cooldown is it will get more damage output out, but you risk the chance of like missing more damage overall. After the laser, I should have said, to be honest, you should go into the armor first. This is a mid-row ship. You want the double HP buff, so do pick those up before going into the main weapon system. After the main weapon system, go into the energy system. We can pick up a further ion damage increase, and we can even get a firing duration by 35% and damage frequency by 1. This is a really substantial, large damage increase, to the point where I could even suggest, after the hit rate upgrades coming into this energy system, grabbing sustained damage output enhancement and going back to the main system to grab your cooldowns and stuff before coming back here to finish off the damage from the main ion cannon damage. Ion cannon damage. Words are difficult today, apparently. So yeah, this really strong, and it seriously ups the damage output of this ship. After that, it has a little hidden gem of a feature, which I honestly you should just be using this as like mid-row anti-air. I didn't put it into the anti-aircraft list, and that's because it's not dedicated anti-air. That entire anti-aircraft tier list that I made was for dedicated anti-air, and this is by no means a dedicated anti-air ship. However, it does reasonably good anti-air damage. So first off, picking up the anti-aircraft support is where you want to go. This allows you to lock onto an air-by row, increases your hit rate for 30 seconds, for 25 seconds. The increase again gives you another, I think it's 5 seconds when you up the system adjustment on here. So again, another one that's worth unlocking. And then you've got this row-wide coverage from ion weapons, bearing in mind. These are experimental anti-aircraft ion cannons, so they deal good damage. They have good accuracy as well for some reason, compared to most ion cannons being awful. So yeah, definitely have a look at that. Grab the anti-aircraft support. After that, I like to go for the double hit rate against fighters, corvettes. That will increase the damage further, and you've got 2 extra slots on here, which is quite nice. There is an argument for energy penetration when the system anti-aircraft weapon attacks aircraft within the first 90 seconds after the battle starts. There is a slight chance to deal energy damage equal to 70% of the target's max HP. This can allow you to very rapidly burst down enemy air, but in a longer fight, you will get more use out of the anti-aircraft support, and you do have to pick one of these because they are strategies, and you can only have one strategy per system. So personally for me, it's anti-aircraft support, double hit rate, cooldown, and I love to pick up the intercept on here because I like having intercept on as much stuff as I possibly can. because it really helps shut down like high damage dealers like Muresses and Callistos and all of those big damage missile ships that will be targeting the mid-row for ships like the Ruby. So it is actually quite a nice little buff. It is only 2%, but again, it just works out quite well on this. After the Flash anti-aircraft AA system, again, propulsion, you only have cruising speed and warp speed, so you just pick them both up. Now, the defensive, you may have seen me use this recently. If you watched my first look at the new server that I'm currently still in, this kind of carried me that early game a little bit due to the fact that it's got massive amounts of healing potential on itself, and then you like support it with Noma, and like you've got a fleet that in PvE people can't, well, the NPCs can't really deal with it all too well, which is actually quite nasty. In PvP, new players can't deal with it at all. They just can't get the damage output to be able to kill it off, and it there becomes a bit of a meme ship and a bit of a meme fleet, which is funny in a way because you generally don't have enough damage to really like knock out new players particularly quickly, but you can have like 3-4 new players like hitting you, and you just sit there with this one little tiny frigate fleet, and they either can't deal with it or they deal with it so badly it takes them like 20 minutes, which is kind of funny to watch. Obviously, memeing on new players shouldn't really do, but every now and then it happens. You know what some new players are like, they get aggressive with you for no reason. So yeah, bear that in mind if you want to sort of have a bit of fun with a new player that's being aggressive without sort of just completely annihilating him. 10 rubies, 10 Nomas, just throw them into one of his fleets and watch him sit there for 20 minutes trying to kill it. It's hilarious. So, the defensive type, unlike the Iron and Root and the Railgun, is a front row ship, something to be aware of, because that means you do need to go into its armor system pretty rapidly. Go for the HP mod, because you'll get more HP increases, and it's got a really good like base HP. Like if you compare that, 24,000, obviously I've got some upgrades here, but you're only sitting at 14,000 on, say, the Ion, and 16,000 for the Railgun, sorry. So it's definitely worth going into. It's also got like quite a nice standard bit of armor. I believe it's 40 base, and then you can get like an additional 6 from physical resistances here, and then its other reinforced armor system, which we'll go into now. So after that base armor system where you take the HP, come down here, grab the emergency repairs. I prefer to grab this quicker than I do normally, because that's why I like to go for the HP first and stuff, because that puts me in a position where it's like, it's got a nice big buffer tank already, so now when I'm adding this repair, you're just increasing that buffer effectiveness. So grabbing emergency repairs, double enhanced repair materials to increase that repair. The emergency repairs, when it gets down to 20%, you get like this massive buff, and it just starts self-repairing at an astronomical rate, and like ships really struggle to deal with it. It is unfortunately a trigger once per battle, but that once per battle is usually enough to keep the ship alive and carry it through to finish and end the fight still alive, which means you don't have to rebuild it, which is great in the early game, because if you do lose frigates, it can throw off your build on base when having to replace them. So after the double repair, I then picked up more ship HP, because more is always good of HP, because if you think about it, it's kind of like a buffer against both energy damage and physical damage, so it's just quite nice. I then pick up the physical resistances, and I take an increased main system HP, because none of the other ones are particularly good. You could argue the crit damage received by the system or the crit damage received by the main system might be better there. Honestly, none of them are in a particularly good place, I feel. So I picked up the main system HP just to keep it alive a bit longer if it is getting targeted. After that, you're going into the Siege Torps. Again, this isn't a particularly great ship for damage. You're just never going to get much damage out of it. It's a very, very high defensive sort of setup. Damage per hit's 231. I think it's a 13 or 14 second cooldown with a 4-second lock on. You get 2 attacks per round though with a 10-second duration. But as you can see, its DPM is pretty poor. You're not using these for damage. You're using these to sit there and tank for your front row. Getting both of the weapon hit rates is nice here. Then one of the cooldowns, and then you grab one of the damages, or you can grab one of the second cooldowns. To be honest, it really doesn't matter too much. You're probably better off going for the second cooldown than the extra damage, but I thought I'd try this one out because I could buff it up for an extra 15% damage on top. I generally think the extra cooldown is probably better in the long term though. Propulsion, again, it's the same as the other two. You got cruising speed and warp speed, so it's nice and simple there. 2 slots, 2 options. And that is the Ruby. This is it maxed out in the defensive format, and it's quite a cool looking ship. It's one of my favourite ship designs because it's sort of no frills attached and very militaristic in nature. And yeah, one of my favourite ships in the game. I run Iron Rubies in my secondary fleet all of the time. A, for a little bit of anti-air screen for that mid-row, but mostly because it's just great damage output. At the end of the day, fantastic damage output, and it's energy damage, which is a pain to try and deal with. Defensive, very good early game. Mid-game, it falls off. A lot of people can have damage output that can just sort of ignore this guy's armor quite a bit. 46 armor isn't anything to tout about, but at the same time, you know, when you get siege casts and stuff, or just the standard casts out, those torps can hit really hard. And unfortunately, that armor's not quite enough to keep it alive with, you know, 30k HP, which is, you know, a little bit unfortunate, but you know, what can you do? It is a frigate at the end of the day. Early game though, great ship, goes into that mean fleet as I mentioned earlier, which can just carry you through against most of the NPC encounters. And if you get some boisterous new players, you can have a bit of fun with them without sort of just throwing them to the graveyard. They'll give up after they take 20 minutes to kill one of your fleets. Trust me, it works. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll catch you next time.